Thank you very, very much, Lorraine, and thank you for having me here. I must say that the crowd today is a little heftier than the one that was here for my education lecture. I assume that I was fighting chocolate then, and I'm not fighting chocolate today. But I have to tell you that of all of the subjects that I'm going to be speaking on during this cruise, I don't think there is one that is more important, at least to me and hopefully you, and I suppose that's signified by your being here, of what the next 4 and possibly 8 years portend for our economy, our educational system, and indeed every level of our society, which I think is going to be impacted in one way or another by a president who will see his own presidency as evolutionary. I suggest that in years to come it may well be looked upon in hindsight as revolutionary. In 1957, then President Dwight Eisenhower gave a very unusual speech. And in that speech, he warned the American people to beware of the growing power and influence of the military-industrial complex. At the time, no one fully understood even what that word meant. It had never been a part of our lexicon, and it sort of died on the vine in terms of public discourse. In the course of my lecture, I will bring some ideas to you as to what he was talking about and how that legacy has impacted us today and how future President Obama is going to react to what has become an endemic system of special interest support and influence in our governmental process. The vision that Obama has and will bring to this process, therefore, has to take into account things that we do not even know need to be factored into the process. I mentioned earlier President Eisenhower's speech about the military-industrial complex. Just to take you back historically to the close of World War I. Fortunately, no one in this room is here to remember, but I can tell you that when World War I was over, even though vast fortunes had been made by war contractors and those affiliated with them, subsequent to World War I, we demobilized very quickly, and they saw a huge lifeline of profitability of businesses all over the country plummet into a recession and ultimately a depression, which we came out of in the 20s only to revisit in the 30s. But the important thing to learn from all this is that at the end of the war, a vested interest was left with no voice in the continuation of its largesse coming from the federal government. Needless to say, people learned pretty quickly, and at the close of World War II, we had a huge military complex of suppliers from one end of the country to the other who had made vast fortunes during World War II, and obviously did not want to see a repeat of the demobilization that happened at the end of World War I to repeat itself at the end of World War II. Coincidentally, a few years later, and this is something that many of you, I'm sure, do remember, we were confronted with what is now referred to as the McCarthy era or McCarthyism. It has been suggested, and indeed Holy Writ seems to say, that the underlying premise of McCarthyism was to ensure that the American system of government was not taken over by a violent overthrow of communists within our ranks, supported morally, ethically, and financially by the Soviet Union. I suggest to you that that probably is inaccurate. I believe that the whole impetus for the McCarthy era was the military and the military industrial complex, as that may be defined, and I'm not even sure if I can define it for you. But those who have a vested interest in our maintaining a high military posture. Because if after the McCarthy era, let alone during it, if you were heard to say, we are at peace, We have the most powerful military in the world. We have the atomic bomb. We have all of the infrastructure that we had prior to the war. We have never been invaded or bombed, and therefore we are the only industrialized nation in the world whose infrastructure is totally intact. We can now take the largesse of the federal government and focus it on individuals' human needs, personal needs, non-military needs, to make our economy stronger, to make our people better educated, to make our infrastructure better and more equipped to deal with a rapidly emerging economical miracle, which we all envisioned in the 50s and 60s. And so, lo and behold, you now could be heard to say, if you advocated a reduction in military expenditures, that you were an appeaser, you were a communist, you were disloyal to America, and therefore those voices were silenced. And in 1957, a very short time after the McCarthy era, toward the close of President Eisenhower's presidency, he told us to beware of the growing power and influence of the military-industrial complex. This from a Cold Warrior, the leader of our armed forces in Europe in World War II, a man who obviously had witnessed the Russians going into Czechoslovakia, had witnessed the Russians crushing Hungary's attempt at freedom, and yet, in spite of what you would consider to be totally antithetical to his background and to our situation existing in the world at that time, he said to us, out of nowhere, beware of the growing power and influence of the military-industrial complex.